Hey there, welcome back to Ask Amy. I have a question today from Cathal. She says, an issue I have is that I sometimes tend to focus on my swallowing and find it hard to get out of the loop of focusing on it, which in turn brings on anxiety and feelings of being stuck. I feel like I recognize and can access my true calm self that you talk about that exists between thought. From your course, I now understand and agree that our brain is like a machine that produces random thoughts and how we then sometimes produce stories which we can focus on that draws us in. But if we let that sit and not get in there, those thoughts will change and dissipate. This is all very helpful and comforting. The difficulty I'm having is that I'm drawn back into negative thoughts by focusing on the physical process of swallowing, which obviously occurs regularly all day, every day. I'm 54 now, and this has been cropping up intermittently as an issue for me since I was a teenager. When I'm busy at work, I forget about it, or if I'm totally engrossed in something like playing music, I don't think about it. If I'm tired after a long day, it can kick in and cause me distress. Yeah, thanks for sharing this, Cathal. And I know I shared with you that I struggled with this at one time too. So I want you to kind of back up a little bit from, this being a problem and what are we going to do about it and that type of thinking, and just sort of like, let's just kind of back up and kind of see what's happening. So in a way of talking about it, it's like this whole thing about focusing on swallowing and then, oh man, how's it going? Is it going okay? Oh my gosh, maybe it isn't. And then like you say, thoughts kind of go over into that direction, and it just gets a little like big in consciousness. All that's happening there, like what's happening there basically, is there's this thought loop. Now, what the thoughts are saying and where attention's going and what it's talking about, in your case, it is kind of like you described, right? It's like, oh, what's happening here? And I feel stuck, and now I'm thinking about it. Now it's getting worse. But it could be anything. And it is other things at times, as it is for all of us. So there could be a thought loop just in it. And it's not just, it's thought, but it doesn't always just feel like thought. Like you're saying, sometimes it's like, oh, we notice something in the body, or we notice something happen. There's some trigger, right, out in the world. And now we're thinking about that, and then we see the trigger more. So whether it's the swallowing thing for you, whether it's anything in the body, whether it's something that appears to be out in the world, whether it's another thought chasing more thoughts, so whether it all feels like it's in thought, it's all the same. It doesn't really matter. And this isn't, and I know you know this isn't really about swallowing either. It has nothing to do with that really, or even about anxiety or any of that. Really what's going on is, again, attention just gets kind of focused in this loop. And when attention is in this loop, it really feels like all the things you say. I feel stuck. This is a problem. I need to somehow see my way out of this. This needs to change. And that is ultimately what's happening. So again, hear this for everyone. It has nothing to do with swallowing, really. It's like attention gets in these sort of thought loops, and from within that, it's looking for a new thought that will help it escape, except it doesn't work that way. More thinking doesn't end the thought loop. What happens, the freedom from the thought loop, is in somehow us kind of seeing, you sort of seeing, oh, this is going on, this whole swallowing thing's going on. Okay, let it go on. I don't need to fix it. I don't need to change it. I don't need to do anything about it. I can't anyway. If you could have, you would have. And there's nothing you can do to fix it or change it. But by just like seeing that it's happening and letting it just do what it's going to do anyway, because what option do you have? Attention is not so absorbed in that. Attention gets to kind of go elsewhere. Maybe what you start to see, which I'm sure you've already seen before at times, is that you can be working and the thought thing is sort of, or the thought loop and the swallowing thing is sort of happening. But maybe attention is a little bit more split. Maybe other times you can be totally at peace and relaxed while this swallowing focused thought loop is happening. Because if it's a matter of attention getting really focused in the thought loop versus attention kind of dissipating and being all over the place, That's just a movement in attention that has nothing to do with anything else. But what you start to see in that is like, oh, this is just playing out. This is just thought and sensation playing out. It's not any kind of other problem. Now, you say, I just want to pull out part of what you say here. When you say you're drawn, this is your quote, like I'm drawn back into negative thoughts by focusing on the physical process of swallowing. Again, what's happening there is attention goes to, how's my swallowing? And then thought goes to, oh no, I don't think it's okay. But that whole process is safe. And that whole process is, it's just playing out, and it can be there. And it isn't telling the truth even about swallowing. Now, I'm not saying that swallowing isn't going to feel tougher in those moments, but that's because the process looks and feels really big and real. This is very hard to describe, but see if you can just get a feel for this. It doesn't matter that that's showing up in thought. That showing up in thought is no different from, feeling a twinge in your leg and your mind going to, oh no, maybe it's a tumor, right? Like that could happen, but that has nothing to do with reality. It doesn't mean there's a tumor. It doesn't mean, it has nothing to do with reality. That would just be a thought experience, and then that would go. And you are okay the whole time in that. So that's kind of what I'm pointing to in this, is watching where the mind and the body go with all of this, but what's watching? This is not about your safety or your health or you having anxiety or any of that. It's just what's playing out. And so, also, I can't see your question, but that's all right. I know there was also something in there about, if I just let this, it's fine and it's safe and it lets us go. Like when we can see thought doing this stuff and we just let it lets us go. And yeah, that's definitely how it can feel. But I also want you to see that you don't even have to let it. Like it does. And if you could look back without the personal attachment to this swallowing thing, you would see that always happens, and it always has happened. There will be a thought loop, and then attention goes somewhere else. Always. Without exception. Now, maybe in that thought loop, it sucks. It's hard. You're thinking, can I swallow? What's wrong with me? Why do I have this anxiety for so long? It's been I've had this so many years. All of that thinking, but that's still just thinking in the thought loop. That isn't the reality of things. I know this sounds weird, but that's not. It's not the reality of things. When that's happening and you're just living your life, it's just not an issue in the same way. So really what I'm pointing to here is pretty big. It's kind of deeper, a lot deeper than the swallowing issue, but is to just keep getting this sense of how thought comes up and creates a past and a future and a you and a problem and stuff to solve and all of that. And the more you can see that that's going on, it just is what's showing up in imagination. And I don't mean imagination to imply that you're not really experiencing it, but I mean imagination in the sense that like it's happening in thought and even in the body. So there's a little trouble swallowing. That's okay. That's okay. It's thought interpreting it, saying, oh no, what does this mean? How long will it last? That's where the suffering is. Any of us could have a little trouble swallowing for a second and it doesn't mean anything. It's the big thought story around it that gives it its meaning. So see if you can just feel into that. Get a sense of that. Next time this starts to happen, fine. Go on with your life. Don't swallow. Don't eat for a little while if that's happening. None of this is what the mind wants to make it be. When you can see that and it's just sort of playing in the background and it doesn't need anything, it's not special, it's not different from any other thought loop, it starts to really get drained of its energy a lot. The attention just doesn't even want to go there in the same way. And then all of this starts to loosen up quite a bit. So I hope that helps. Thank you so much for sending your question. Send questions to AskAmy at thelittleschoolofbigchange.com, and I'll see you guys next time.